there, I'm Kara Pallone, and I'm the news director at Kodo Radio, and I'm here with Mayor Sean Murphy. Thank you for being here, Sean.
Thank you, Kara. It's a pleasure to be here.
Pleasure to see you. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you. Same to you and same to everybody else.
Yes, absolutely. Where are you going for Thanksgiving?
I'm heading down to Houston, so
Okay.
Just a small family thing, nothing big. And you?
You know, I'm not quite sure yet. Day before, I'll figure it
Thanksgiving
out.
spontaneity.
Yeah, exactly.
But it probably won't involve airline travel.
No, it absolutely won't. Definitely not. So yesterday, when I was sitting in town council, it dawned on me that it is your 1-year anniversary as mayor.
It's true. About a year and a week.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's really gone by far faster than I ever would have expected.
Yeah.
But it's been one of the most invigorating and positive experiences of my lifetime. So.
What have been some of the highlights of the past year, if you had to just off the top of your head?
You know, I think if you sat through yesterday's meeting and you sort of listened to the tone and the way the council was not shy about engaging with each other, but actually very courteous and very civil. You know, it's no secret, like the rest of the country, that Telluride was pretty evenly divided a year ago at the election. And it's been a real refreshing thing to see people sort of coalesce and be able to come together on certain issues and not be rigidly entrenched in their respective camps. So I think that's been a positive, part of the positive takeaways from the past year.
Has it been really just a learning experience the past year? Does it take a year to really figure out and get in the flow of things as mayor? Because you were on council before, so I'm sure there's a difference.
For those of you who don't recall all the detail, I served for 9 months, so I served the last 9 months of Tom Carnevale's second term. And so I would say that it really didn't take me very long to get up to speed or to get into the flow. I would say that, you know, the first couple of months after I was appointed to serve out that vacancy, there were some, you know, I didn't speak that much, and I'm a fan of listening first and talking second. And so my sort of breaking in period or test period was really then. So by the time I became mayor on November 17th, 2015, I was ready, job ready day one. So
What have you found to be the most surprising or challenging aspects of the job?
I think it's sometimes what comes up during the discourse. You know, none of us really know what each other's going to be saying or what each one has been doing in terms of research and reading in advance other than the packet. And so I think it's been really interesting to have, like for example, yesterday we were talking about a potential memorandum of understanding with the county, with the town of Mountain Village, and with the Telluride Foundation to sort of follow a little bit of a different alternative path in, you know, parallel to what we're already doing.
Public-private partnership.
Right, and so one of our council people made reference to an intergovernmental agreement from 9 years ago, and it was fascinating because, you know, that's part of her ballywick, and her prior experience was, you know, gave her kind of the advantage and the insight. So it's actually very interesting to see where people are going to come from and what they bring to the table. So
that was a really interesting conversation. Housing obviously is a big discussion in our community right now.
I think it still remains the primary issue, and it won't change.
And so Paul Major was there with the Telluride Foundation presenting this initiative that they are spearheading. It's called P3, like I mentioned, public-private partnership. And the county and Mountain Village are on board, but it seemed like the town council was a little reluctant yesterday to get on board with this memorandum of understanding. You were in support. You said, I think what your quote was, it would be a shame to pass on this opportunity. But like Ann Brady, Councilmember Ann Brady, felt like it was just another layer of bureaucracy, and it would take away from what the town is doing. The town is successfully bringing housing projects online. Why do you think that this would be a worthy endeavor to participate in?
I think if you want to try to boil it down, this is an opportunity to get more faster. You know, quite frankly, the town has limited bandwidth. We have limited amount of land. We have one full-time dedicated person who's absolutely brilliant, but you know, he can only do so many projects, at one time. And so I think it's really a function of, if we're sort of maxing out on our own capacity, where can we find another place where we can actually incrementally get more done? So the other thing that it is distinctive about this potential memorandum of understanding relationship is the town of Mountain Village, the town of Telluride and San Miguel County, and the foundation would form basically an oversight committee. And they would, with the combinations of an elected official plus a town manager from each of the three governments, they would basically try to hash out, okay, on a grand scheme, if we need to attract a different kind of development here, i.e. one where a developer maybe from another market would come in and say, you know what, I have to have scale. I have to produce 60 to 80 units.
Sure.
I can't do an 8-unit project like the Spruce House. They may have less interest in doing our Virginia Placer project, which should break ground next spring. There may not be enough interest if you're only going to build 22-bedroom apartments in a boarding house. So if we could, as the three governments, take a holistic and sort of a 10,000-foot approach to the region and figure out, okay, if we say this parcel, that parcel, and this parcel might be available and solicit then offers to develop that, I think we might actually come up with solutions that are not necessarily constrained the way we've been in the past.
And so the idea is to hire an owner's rep to be that point of contact and represent the governments and negotiate with developers and private investment companies.
Right. It's the same thing. I would liken it to, I didn't mention this yesterday, but I would liken it to going to a specialist. If you have a specific issue that you need somebody with a higher level of skill and expertise and that actually focuses only on doing something like that, that's, I think, the distinction that wasn't drawn out and will come out in the coming weeks and months when we continue to discuss this. And that is, we need somebody who's very skilled in coming into marketplaces like this and saying, you know what, on their own, these three entities can't do it. There's willingness, there's a will, but there's really not a way. If we want to try to do something creative like low-income tax financing, nobody's done that. I mean, we have a little bit of Section 8 housing at Shandoka, but there may be, when we had the Ideas Festival from the Telluride Institute earlier in September 9th to the 11th, they brought in a couple of experts from Washington, D.C. and New York City who work all the time doing this sort of thing. Well, there's a whole learning curve there that just doesn't exist, and then there's a knowledge base that we would need to tap into. So that's really what an owner's rep would bring to the table that somebody already brilliant like Lance wouldn't.
Okay.
So that plus, we have a limited amount of people available to do these things. And so just dialing in someone for, let's say, a year-long project, it could be far more efficient that way. And you're not having that person on salary, in perpetuity.
Sure.
You're basically doing a one-time arrangement, or maybe we get 2 or 3 of these done in the next 5-6 years, but it's not like we're having a burn rate for some of our government assets. And that was an interesting distinction, because the owner's rep model that's been proposed by the Telluride Foundation involves the foundation first putting forward about $50,000,
Right.
and that would be used as operating expense money then, so that this committee could come together, start interviewing potential owner's reps, figuring out what the cost would be. There is really no hard number. So,
Right now, it's a non-binding agreement, but as I think Council Member Jenny Patterson pointed out, eventually there's going to be a financial request of the town.
Possibly, quite possibly. And the distinction there to make is that if the town is not comfortable or willing to simply put that money into it without a expectation of any return of any part of the principal, or likewise, they could structure a development so that the town's contribution, actually all three governments' contributions, could come back out upon completion of the project, assuming it was something that was going to be sold, and you had an income stream afterward.
Okay, so this will come back to the council for a vote on December 13th, is that right?
Right. I think the important thing to think about, we're going to have both a work session on December 13th as well as potentially an action item after that. And the takeaway, I think, is this is truly just an effort to agree to work together. I don't think it's something where there is no hardwired financial predetermination of anything. If you look at the language of the agreement, it says agree to consider. And so the only person who's actually putting money up at this moment is the Telluride Foundation. They're the ones 100% at risk at this point.
Right.
If we don't find that there's a suitable project, and if we don't find that there's any sort of a developer, then frankly, no one's lost much except the foundation.
Okay.
So it's worth trying, and I think it is a shame if we pass on that opportunity.
I have to, you said I could ask you anything.
Of course.
And Sarah would ask this if she were here. Sarah Holbrook, who usually moderates this show or leads this show. You mentioned yesterday that Shandoka is rotting.
Well,
What's
I
going
think
on
if
with
you've
that?
looked at the last couple of years, we've been making significant maintenance upgrades. We've been replacing siding, we've been replacing windows, and that process is going to continue. So, I mean, those buildings, some of them are coming up on 30s, 40 years.
Yeah.
And so, obviously, we all know that deferred maintenance, not that anybody wants to defer maintenance, but I think we have a history of basically not being as proactive with maintaining that compound. And so what we need to do, and we're playing catch up now, and we have been, but you have to realize the average life of a building is a little less than 40 years. And so we're really coming up upon that, and we really, people want to live differently. It was interesting, the architects from Aspen, the Charles Cuniff team that came over to master plan and then designed the Virginia Placer project for us,
stage too.
said, they take a much more holistic approach and a more human approach to saying, okay, we're not just building little boxes to have people, return to and sleep in. We want actually your housing to be more organic and to feel like you're connected with a community and not some sort of, motel compound. So perhaps rotting is too strong a word, but I think you can find that where you don't look proactively and you don't look out into the future, you're going to be stuck with an asset that's maybe we can reclad it, but it's really not an ideal highest and best type of housing. So I think we can do better.
I think everyone in the audience kind of woke up when you used that word yesterday. Not to say that it was a boring meeting by any means. I'm just, my ears perked up anyway.
It's fair, and we do have in the capital plan in the next few years, there are more siding and more window replacement projects in the works. But it's one thing to maintain, it's another thing to actually create something that is actually going to improve community. And I think we have an opportunity, and that's frankly a good example of where the scale lends itself to attracting a different kind of a builder or development team, and that may be an area where we do realize that housing stock has a limited life. There's probably X number of years left for that, and we need to maybe think about what's the master plan there and whom can we get to build on that scale.
Okay.
So we'll see. But
the saga continues. The housing saga continues.
Indeed. And of course, as you know, in addition to the Virginia Placer, there have been a series of discussions on the SMPA lot. So
is the AHA school still planning on moving into that space?
Yes.
Purchasing that space? Okay, so that will still be, and that's an example, as Paul Major mentioned yesterday, as sort of a public-private partnership. That is going to be a really interesting development in that Four Corners area with everything that's going on there.
I agree. No, it should be, we're hoping that it really becomes an anchor for both culture, affordable housing, and the parking use.
And I believe Telluride Arts announced a timeline recently for when they want the transfer warehouse to be in operation.
If we could
it's
basically
soon.
get there.
I can't remember the specific date, but it's soon.
Well, we'll have to have Kate Jones on and get her to give us more detail.
You know what else I just remembered is you haven't had a show since the election.
Since the national election,
Since the national election and the local election for our local election issues. Where were you watching the election, and what was your reaction to the presidential outcome?
Well, I was in Texas.
Wow, that's a
and it was. Someone asked me yesterday. In fact, Councilperson Patterson, sorry, Jenny. She said, "What was the mood like?" And I said, it was kind of interesting because I think no different than most other places, people who were supportive of Donald Trump weren't very vocal. And so I wasn't at a large public gathering or anything like that. But I think a lot of people struggled with the choice. I know I did. And we all know each other's warts and shortcomings in way too much detail, it seems, sometimes. So I think there was no really perfect alternative.
Are you a Republican?
I'm not, no. I grew up Republican, but I'm a registered Democrat. And years ago, when I felt the Republican Party had parted company with sort of my social progressive outlook, but my more conservative fiscal disposition, I felt like I didn't have a party home. And frankly, I don't feel that way entirely with the Democratic Party either. I think, there is a certain truth to the fact that they may have had a bad electoral outcome because they took advantage or took for granted a segment of the population. And so it's hard to be motivated, to get excited about, just two parties, and, there's no such thing as a customization, so you have to pick.
Right.
So, but I would say it was an interesting social science experiment. I think that
it wasn't Telluride, too.
What was it like here? What did I miss?
Somber, I would say, for the most part, in Telluride proper. Although, you know, I talked with Terry Snyder-Lammers, who ran for commissioner the next day, and she was thrilled that her party won on a national level, even though she lost the local race. So mixed. We hosted that evening our election show, and had results and announced results, and then realized that our playlist wasn't really working for what we thought was going to happen. And so
I think that was a common theme.
Which was a great lesson of journalism, never assume. And so we opened up the phone lines, and people were able to call in requests, and we got, you know, like Cry Me a River, Justin Timberlake, and The Thrill Is Gone, and some requests like that. So, yeah, but it was interesting. And then, you know, of course, we have to think
nobody
about...
wanted REM, It's the End of the World?
Oh, that was played.
Okay.
That was played. But on a local level, so we have to look at the local election results. So SMART passed. That's the Regional Transit Authority.
Terrific. I mean, frankly, the silver lining in all of this is both the SMART initiative the Regional Transit Authority passed, as well as our parking bond. So we can actually make some significant progress in terms of our individual community's quality of life.
And are you on the SMART board?
Yes, Todd Brown and I are the two regular members from the Telluride Town Council, and Kristen Permakoff is the alternate.
And then obviously the county has representatives, and Mountain Village has representatives.
There are two board members from each of the three governments, and then there's also, you know, support and management.
What's the next steps with SMART? When will the public see change or notice that this authority has been formed? You know, are there any immediate changes planned?
There's been, well, first of all, there's sort of an idea of ramping up. So in our first year in 2017, we've just had an organizational meeting about a week ago. We basically completed whatever the necessary filings are with the state in order to be able to collect the sales tax portion of the funding mechanism for the SMART. And so we are very much at the formation. We've today, by the end of today, we'll probably finalize and maybe early next week circulate a request for proposal for people who want to be candidates to be considered for being the director of the Regional Transit Authority.
I saw that job description.
So it's we have high expectations, and you know, that's what we should all strive for. So I'm hopeful that, as again, with the rest of life, nothing is completely perfect. You never can find exactly the perfect combination, but it doesn't hurt to ask, and let's see what we can find.
Onward and upward.
Absolutely.
Ramp up. I like that.
And you know, I think that's really one of the areas where government is going to be able to deliver more measurable improvements and measurable quality of service. And that's, I think, where we are distinguished from a lot of communities, having lived in other cities and other markets and other states. It's seldom that you can actually see, okay, if I take this action, approve this bond, or approve this request for a tax increase, what do I get back? And so I think the answer is nothing changes within our town transit network, but you'll actually get greater frequency down valley. We're going to stitch the county together more holistically, and my hope is that other communities, you know, this is very much, we're going to start using the playbook that Aspen and Pitkin County followed, and that is form it and then the rest will come. And so they've had a regional transit authority that was formed in the 1980s, and it's grown progressively into a 70-mile large rural transit district. And so our hope is that we can one day stretch from here to Montrose, for example.
And did you mention, you might have just said, but when we can expect greater frequency to, you know, Norwood, Down Valley, is that 2017?
I would say that there's a likelihood that there'll be some capacity increase during the latter part of 2017.
Okay.
That's very much dependent on first collecting some resources and from the two tax mechanisms, and then getting the executive director to formulate the strategy and the plan.
That's kind of the first step. Got it.
But first we need to identify the right talent and then have that person in the leadership role. Because the government board members, obviously they have the oversight function and they need to make sure that this is serving all the communities involved. But the day-to-day administrative management is very much up to the new to be determined director.
Okay, and with the sample lot, we touched on that briefly. That's the development that's planned for that lot across from Baked and Telluride.
Correct.
When is the parking slated to come online? Is that spring 2017?
I think it'll be a little, we're still in the planning phase for what the building's going to look like. And so, and that process is every 2-week process at this point. We have representatives of the AHA school and the town meeting with architecture teams and trying to figure out, okay, here's the the function, and then what's the form looking like then
Okay.
after that. So that's not something I've been intimately involved with. There are 4 council people who actually do attend those meetings with
On
a very
the
regular frequency.
Housing Subcommittee?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
So, but that's a project that I would expect later in the course of 2017
Got it.
that we would begin to break ground, assuming that we find what the community and we and the AHA school needs
Okay.
in one good package. But
You know what I didn't touch on, which is the newest news in our community. Obviously, if you look outside right now, it's sunny. The ski resort's delayed opening. And I was wondering how this is going to affect our local economy, even though it's just a week later. They announced yesterday, the ski resort announced that they're opening December 2nd, Friday, December 2nd. So it'll be a week late in opening. Have you talked with Michael Martelon with the Telluride Tourism Board or with Bill Jensen?
I have not spoken with either of them specifically about this. My sense, though, just from the last 3 or 4 days, there are more people here than there usually are the week before Thanksgiving.
Someone mentioned that the core in Mountain Village was pretty busy.
Yeah, I
This
haven't,
week.
haven't actually crossed over the ridgeline, but I've been out to dinner twice in the last 2 nights, and frankly, each place has been very full.
Do you think it's just though because people had already made reservations expecting the mountain to open on Thanksgiving?
Well, I actually had a chance to talk to a couple from Pittsburgh last night, sitting
okay.
at the bar at Smuggler, and they basically were just doing a trip spontaneously. They have a daughter who lives in Boulder, and they were doing a trip out here anyway, so they decided to just stitch Boulder to Moab into some stops in Leadville, Telluride, Ouray.
Okay, so they didn't mention they weren't angry.
No, and I think
How often does that happen with you sitting down next to someone at a bar, not angry, not upset?
Actually, no. There's I would say the highest level of attention is at council. But when you know we're out and about and in social settings and whatnot, that's been one of the big surprises of the job, which hopefully it'll stay this way. I have not had a single highly emotionally negative charged heated discussion with anyone. So. In fact, quite the contrary, I've had people come up to me and basically say, I didn't vote for you, but I actually, you're doing a good job, and keep it up. So,
Good to hear.
and that's really where the rubber meets the road, because we can't stay divided tribal camps. We really have to figure out where do we have overlapping interests, and that's not always the same on every issue. But that doesn't mean you don't ask, and that you don't, try to find wherever that overlap is.
Yeah, you still have 3 years ahead of you.
Yeah, no, it'll be a very exciting time.
What do
I
you?
think we can,
what's on your mayoral bucket list for the next 3 years, assuming that you weren't going to run again?
Well, I think obviously housing is the key, and then transit followed, in succession
They go
or
hand
hand in hand with transit. So I'm very optimistic that by November of 2019, we'll have a lot more units of housing in town, as well as in the region, as well as a network, an enhanced network of service in terms of transit.
Okay.
So I would hope to be able to point to multiple new bus routes at that point. I would hope to be able to say, Virginia Placer's done, the AHA School Complex, the Sampa lot is done. We're probably, on the cusp after we finish Virginia Placer and the AHA School project. We need to think beyond what's going to happen in 20 years, and we're not going to continue to stay stagnant. So there will be growth, albeit limited because we don't have more than 10% vacant land left. But there will be more people living in the community, and so we need to make sure that we can accommodate that.
Can you gaze into the crystal ball and tell viewers what's going to be on Lot B in 3 years?
Oh, if only I knew. I have no idea. But I think that, it's time for us to we should touch base periodically about that. The community's concepts and the needs change over time. And so someone was saying the other day, gee, what if we get in a situation where where somehow we don't have the housing need, but we have another, incredible, terrible need due to a natural disaster or something like that. So we need to be prepared, and we need to have reserves and be prudent with our assets in the meantime. But I think Lot B is up to the community to decide. Okay. And I'm happy to be part of the conversation, just like I'm happy to be part of the conversation about where the Med Center should be. So
that's a whole nother topic. Not going in Mountain Village, from what I understand.
That's what we've been told, yes. So
back to the drawing board for the hospital district at this point.
I think with the benefit of the experience that hospital district has gained in the last year and a half especially, and the new board members that have come on with maybe a little bit of a different approach, I think you're finding that they're taking a very long, hard look at really what the need is, and then the location and the type of building will follow from that. But I think that's the real root of where the analysis has to start. And so, from what I heard, I don't really know that much more than anyone else does. I will say the town of Telluride is certainly happy to engage and to be supportive in any way we can, and we would love to be a partner, because that's another thing where it's a regional benefit. That medical center is used probably 35% by residents of the town of Telluride, 25% by Mountain Village resident people, and then 40% by the broader region. And so we're really the minority in that equation. And so we need to be sensitive to the fact that that serves not just us or the two towns, but other people. And I think that the people doing the planning now, that board, is very aware of that. And with John Gardner joining them as their new CEO, or relatively new, I think they have somebody who's very skilled and well-versed in what it takes to run a rural medical facility.
He came in Yuma when that medical facility was in the construction phase. So I think he's kind of excited to be able to start from the beginning here and see it through.
It's funny because I had maybe about 2 months ago, Wendy Brooks and I were sitting talking about something, and she mentioned to me that she had worked in the 60s as part of Sergeant Shriver's entourage that was trying to figure out what's the right answer for rural health care. And she has some very strong views. And her sort of advice was, look, let's not keep reinventing the wheel. Maybe we need to look back at what we, determined in that point. And her takeaway in a nutshell was they decided that, you needed regional hospital facilities, but that a lot of these rural areas needed nothing more than a medical center.
Accessibility.
So, exactly. But as we improve our transit capabilities and we can help people get back and forth between here and Montrose, for example, to go to doctor's appointments and see specialists as needs arise, I think that's an important thing that we need to be planning toward. Yeah.
Yes.
But
I had another topic that I wanted to touch on briefly from yesterday's council meeting, and that's the summer festival season. There was a request from Kodo for the doodah dates for next summer.
And in full disclosure,
I am the Kodo news director. But you mentioned that you would like to not see anything on that weekend, and I can't think, what weekend is it off the top of my head?
It's actually August 25th and 26th,
which is the Pretty Lights.
2017. Has, for the prior 2 years, been with Pretty Lights.
Okay.
And then in more, less recent history, it had been a Kodo event that weekend.
So as
as
Arroyo recently closed, as a former business owner, do you feel differently now about the summer festival season? Yesterday you said you'd like to not see anything on that weekend. Would you have had a different take before?
Well, my take, and you can go back to the November 1st meeting as well, I was the only council person that voted against a capacity increase for bluegrass. So this is another part of the, everybody comes at a problem with some preconceived notions, or maybe thinking, okay, here's my economic interest in this equation, or here's my, philosophy, and here's what I want to see happen. The important part is, while you're engaged with everybody else who has more information or different viewpoints, that you actually listen to them and think about, okay, let's take a step back. What works for everybody, or the greatest number of people, not just simply a small segment of merchants or a small segment of lodgers. And so in this case, I think those of you who attended or listened or covered the meeting on November 1st, we had more than 3 hours of public discussion about quality of life impacts, and impacts on recreation, impacts
on public comment.
Yes. And so I took that very much to heart. And what I heard was more than 80% of the people who chose to come, and a healthy number of people who submitted written comments saying, let's just be cognizant of the fact that we feel overwhelmed.
So it was clear to you that it's not just a vocal minority that is upset with or is hoping for?
I think that it's, whether or not it's a minority or not, or how vocal it is a fact of life that we have to balance, these impacts. And it's not that anybody's saying, if you talk to the tourism board, for example, they'll tell you that the direct spend from all these festivals is, let's say, $150 million, and that the economic impact when you multiply that by 2.75 or whatever is in excess of $500 million. That's huge for a 2,300 person town. That's huge for the whole region. And so you have to basically carefully balance, okay, it has a life of its own. It's become something that people from all over the country and all over the world are more and more aware of and travel here. I was just actually on vacation in Hawaii in October, And 2 people at the hotel where I was staying, one was a guest and one was an employee, had been to Telluride in the past 12 months.
Well, we
And
were
it
just
was
Telluride Ski Resort
tremendous.
was #1 on Condé Nast's recent best ski areas in the U.S. and Canada.
Well, we'll
just
take that
recently.
any
Yeah.
year, but I'm glad it's at our backs this year too, because as you mentioned, the snow has been,
Right.
I think will continue to be a bit of a challenge if you believe the Farmer's Almanac and the wise men in
Which I do.
Montrose that I've had some contact with. I've been told that we're going to have a late onset winter, so, and it's certainly looking that way at the moment.
I have the Farmer's Almanac on my
But back to the
desk.
community impacts and back to the quality of life issues with the major music festivals, I think that was the bend point yesterday was, okay, we had a major proposed festival and we had one that was not major, a minor.
Right,
And
which is the Codo
based
proposal.
on what we heard 3 weeks ago, and frankly, this has been, this was an election issue a year ago. A lot of people were very concerned about the fact that the town had committed to constructing a new stage, and I had more than one person come up to me in the course of that, 2 months prior to that election saying, well, you guys supported the stage, which means you are automatically, on side with bringing more and more talent and more concerts here. And that's not necessarily the case. I think we have to keep an open mind, and everything is, very much an annual balance. And if we
Sure.
figure out that in 1 year, perhaps this past year, we got a little excessive, or that there were too many impacts, then it's time for us to maybe,
Tone it
push
back
the
a little
pendulum
bit.
back and turn it down. So no pun intended. But I think the fact that we've given direction to the Parks and Rec Board and to CASE that the council does not want to see a major festival on the weekend of the 25th, 26th, and certainly no value judgment with respect to the organizer of that or anybody else who wanted to bring
Right.
that kind of thing here. It's just that we need a little bit more balance, and that sort of an event, and also the Codo event, in my opinion, would be best a month or 2 earlier or later. And so condensing everything, I know it's
Noted.
peak time, but
Okay.
we saw a great example in that with Neil Young this year. I mean, Neil Young, when you talk to the lodgers, they were like 90% booked out.
Wow.
That's historic.
For that time of
For
the year.
that time of
Yeah.
the year. It's amazing. And so I'm not saying that that's necessarily achievable every late October period, but or late September, October.
Sure.
But I think we have to strive more in that direction, and we have to encourage people to do events then, and not necessarily encourage large events during the peak times that we already have.
Sean, I want to just wrap up and talk about what people can expect in December at the council meeting. If you could summarize what is coming up.
Sure. Well, those people who've been watching the whole land use code debate that's been going on, for the past year and a half, P&Z has been involved in a long-range planning exercise, and they, together with HARC, have come forward with a series of recommended mass and scale land use code amendments. And so actually in yesterday's council meeting, we passed on second reading of an ordinance to change and update the land use code to allow for increasing setbacks for residential districts, as well as decreasing the size of the structure. So that's responsive to very much another, constant push-pull tension in the community, and that is, how do we preserve while not somehow being unconscious about the fact that growth is going to happen and that you're going to have people that want to, redevelop. And so that's part of the cycle. And what we've done is in the last 20 years or so, we haven't made adjustments to our land use code. So we've seen a certain discrete package of mass and scale adjustments that we just adopted yesterday. And then in December, we'll have a work session and potentially a first reading for an ordinance. The town, the HARC and the P&Z and the town council actually formulated a commercial zoning task force that met for the better part of last year and into this year. They've issued a series of recommendations, and so like with any good study, then you need to translate that into action steps. And so the action step, and hopefully the community conversation that will start on the 13th and continue for the following month or two until that some form of those proposed amendments are adopted or not, is, okay, are these being responsive to what the community wants? I think the mass and scale reductions clearly are. It's a step and an acknowledgement that there was a significant part of the community, a large vocal majority, however you want to put it.
Was there any public comment yesterday?
Unfortunately, no. That was a surprise to me, especially since I found it quite amusing that actually we'd done the first reading November 1st. There was some public comment, but not much. And then in the interim between the 1st and the 22nd, I heard from a certain couple of realtors in town who were a little concerned about any reduction in square footage or floor area ratio. but no one from either the real estate community or anyone else with an interest in it turned up yesterday. So I don't know why. It is Thanksgiving week, so there may have been less availability for people to do that, but the mechanism of giving us written comment, and emailing us or calling us, that really didn't come about. So the Commercial Zoning Task Force, though, and I won't go on too long about this, is that we have a real tension on Main Street, and actually my business was, part of that tension, where we have a ground floor vitality and new businesses that want to fill niches. Like my former business, Arroyo, was very much of an events and a gathering space. And there is a natural tension when you have residential 2 floors above a space where you have gatherings of 50 people. And you have, in our town, as we all know, a very limited opportunity to make money. So you tend to have, just like the festivals, most of the business is aggregated in the summer months. And that's when a lot of people are using their second homes upstairs, and they don't want any noise. So the Commercial Zoning Task Force, and I'll be very interested to see what sort of action steps they want to propose in terms
to
of
alleviate that issue?
trying to minimize the conflict. And frankly, part of the conflict comes when you have the residential creeping downward in buildings and sitting right on top of commercial.
That would be really interesting.
Yeah, I've learned a lot, and it's something where, like a lot of the marketplace controlled and the HOA board controlled in that regard. And so, like other businesses historically that have not been in harmony with their HOA boards, ultimately the HOA board tends to win. And so to the extent that we can actually take some of that poisonous dynamic out of the equation by adjusting zoning in the downtown commercial core, which I think no one would disagree that any town needs a vibrant commercial core. And so please come to the December 13th meeting, give us your comments, and think about it before you react.
Great, excellent. And the P3 housing initiative will be brought back on December 13th?
Yes, we will discuss that again.
And I'm sure there will be lots of other really interesting items on that agenda.
Well, we won't quite get to the dog poop issue, but stay tuned in January, February for more on that.
Oh, good, okay.
That's certainly another quality of life thing where we can actually have a measurable impact as a government, and that's another area where our leash laws haven't been updated for a long time, not that that's poop related, but we have conflicts that arise in terms of people not being responsible dog owners or just safety issues.
So anyway, let's wrap this up. And
on a happy note, have a good Thanksgiving, and thank
I'm a
you
responsible dog owner, I promise.
I know. I mean, I actually think that the best dog is a leashed dog too. I mean, my dogs, both of them.
Yeah, I see your dogs always on leashes. They're very well trained. Well, thank you so very much for coming in, and thank you for being so accessible this past year. We really appreciate it at Kodo and here at TTV. So
anytime, and I welcome that anytime. So thanks again.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thanks, you too. Bye-bye.